The morning shift at Riverside Cafe was always the hardest. Nina Hartley had learned that in her 3 years waiting tables. The early crowd came in tired and impatient, wanting their coffee hot and their service invisible. At 28, she'd mastered the art of being both efficient and forgettable. She tied her apron tighter, ignoring the frayed edges. Money was tight again this month. Her mother's medical bills kept climbing, and the part-time job at the cafe barely covered rent. But Nina had learned not to complain. Complaining didn't change anything. The November morning was cold, frost still clinging to the windows. Nina refilled coffee cups and cleared plates, moving through the familiar rhythm of her shift. Outside, she could see people hurrying past, wrapped in expensive coats, heading to offices and important meetings. That's when she noticed him. A man sat hunched on the bench across the street, his clothes torn and dirty. He looked to be in his early 40s, with dark stubble and hollow eyes. He'd been there for over an hour, watching people pass without really seeing them. Nina had seen enough homeless people in this neighborhood to recognize the particular kind of defeat in his posture. Not just broken. She glanced at her manager, Robert, who was busy in the back office. The cafe had a strict policy about homeless people. Don't encourage them, don't let them linger. It was bad for business, Robert always said, but something about this man tugged at Nina's heart. During her break, she made a decision that probably wasn't smart. She fixed a plate with eggs, toast, and bacon, added a large coffee with cream and sugar. Then she walked outside, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. The man looked up as she approached, suspicion flickering across his face. "I thought you might be hungry," Nina said simply, holding out the plate. He stared at the food like it might disappear. "I don't have money." "I didn't ask for any. Why?" His voice was rough, unused to kindness. Nina shrugged. "Because everyone deserves breakfast." His hands shook as he took the plate. "Thank you," he whispered, and Nina saw tears gathering in his eyes. She started to leave, but he spoke again. "My name is Daniel Morrison." "Nina," she replied with a small smile. "Enjoy the food, Daniel." Back inside, Robert was waiting with crossed arms. "Did you just give away cafe food?" Nina's stomach dropped. "I paid for it. Took it out of my tips." That was a lie. She hadn't had time to pay yet, but she would. Even if it meant going without lunch this week. Robert's expression softened slightly. "You've got a good heart, Nina, but good hearts don't pay bills. Don't make a habit of this." "Yes, sir." The rest of her shift passed in a blur. When she finally headed home that evening, Daniel was gone from the bench. She hoped he'd found somewhere warm to sleep. The next morning, Nina arrived for her shift to find chaos. Robert was pacing near the door, his face pale. The other waitress, Kelly, looked equally rattled. Several customers stood awkwardly, unsure whether to stay or leave. "What's going on?" Nina asked, hanging up her coat. "The owner is here," Kelly hissed. "The actual owner? He's never come to this location before?" Nina's heart sank. The Riverside Cafe was part of a small chain. She'd never met the owner, but everyone knew his reputation. Tough, exacting, quick to fire people who didn't meet his standards. Why is he here? No idea. But Robert is freaking out. A man emerged from the back office, and Nina's breath caught in her throat. It was Daniel, but not the Daniel she'd seen yesterday. This Daniel wore an expensive charcoal suit, his hair neatly trimmed, his face clean-shaven. Only his eyes were the same, dark and haunted and impossibly tired. He scanned the cafe, and when his gaze landed on Nina, he stopped. "You," he said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. Nina felt her face flush. "I don't understand." Daniel walked over, and she could see Robert watching nervously from the corner. "Yesterday you gave me breakfast," Daniel said. "Do you remember?" "Yes," Nina managed. "You were on the bench outside. Did you know who I was?" "You said your name was Daniel Morrison. Did you know I own this cafe?" "That I own 7 cafes across the city?" The room went completely silent. Nina shook her head, confusion and fear swirling together. "No, I just saw someone who looked hungry." Daniel's expression was unreadable. "Come with me, please." He led her to the back office, away from the staring eyes. Once inside, he closed the door and leaned against the desk, suddenly looking exhausted despite the expensive suit. "I need to explain something," he said. 3 months ago, my wife died. Pancreatic cancer. We'd been married 22 years. Nina's hand moved to her mouth. "I fell apart," Daniel continued, his voice hollow. "Stopped going to work. Stopped caring about the business I'd built. My brother has been running things, trying to keep it together while I spiraled." He looked down at his hands. 2 weeks ago, I walked out of my house and just kept walking. Left my phone, my wallet, everything. I wanted to disappear. "That's why you were dressed like that," Nina whispered. He nodded. "I've been living on the streets, trying to understand how my life fell apart. Trying to feel something other than this emptiness." His eyes met hers. "And then you brought me breakfast. A complete stranger who had no reason to be kind. Who probably couldn't afford to be kind," Nina swallowed hard. "Everyone deserves breakfast." "That's what you said yesterday." Daniel's voice cracked slightly. "You have no idea what those words meant. For weeks I'd been invisible. People looked through me like I didn't exist. But you saw me. You saw a human being worth feeding." Tears were streaming down Nina's face now. "I went back to my brother's house last night," Daniel said. "Showered, shaved, tried to put myself back together. And I realized something. If a waitress making minimum wage could show that much compassion to a stranger, then I was dishonoring my wife's memory by giving up." He straightened. "And suddenly he looked like the successful businessman he was. My wife spent her whole life helping people. She volunteered at shelters, donated to food banks, saw the humanity in everyone." His voice grew stronger. "You reminded me of her. And you reminded me why I built this business in the first place. Not just to make money, but to create places where people could gather and connect." Nina didn't know what to say. Daniel pulled out his phone. "I want to offer you something. I'm looking for someone to help me rebuild. Someone who understands what really matters. Not just profit margins, but people." He looked at her intently. "How would you feel about managing community outreach for all 7 cafes? Starting a program where we feed homeless people, hire people who need second chances, create real connection in our spaces?" Nina's mind reeled. "I'm just a waitress. I don't have experience with that kind of work. You have the only experience that matters. You have compassion." Daniel's expression softened. "The salary is $45,000 a year plus benefits. You'd work with me directly to design the program however you think would help most. $45,000. Nina's current salary was barely $20,000. "Why me?" she whispered. "You could hire anyone. Because yesterday, when it cost you something, when no one was watching, when you had every reason not to, you chose kindness anyway." He paused. "That's the rarest qualification there is." Nina thought about her mother's medical bills, about the electricity bill she'd been putting off, about the shoes she needed but couldn't afford. But more than that, she thought about the man on the bench and how it had felt to offer warmth to someone in the cold. "I want to help design a program that really works," she said slowly. "Not just handouts, but pathways. Job training, mental health support, sustainable assistance." Daniel smiled for the first time. "Then we're in agreement." "Yes," Nina said, her voice growing stronger. "Yes, I'll do it." They shook hands and Nina felt her whole world shifting. Over the next year, Nina transformed the cafe chain. She created a program called The Breakfast Table, where homeless individuals could receive free meals with dignity, no questions asked. She partnered with job training programs and hired people who needed second chances. She turned the cafes into community hubs, where connection mattered more than consumption. Daniel worked alongside her, fully engaged again. They became friends, bonded by shared values and the memory of one cold November morning. On the anniversary of that day, they stood outside the original Riverside Cafe. A man sat on the same bench where Daniel had once waited, and Nina walked over with a plate of food. "Thought you might be hungry," she said gently. The man took the plate with shaking hands and tears in his eyes. "Thank you." Daniel watched from the doorway, and when Nina returned, he said, "You're still doing it, even though you don't have to anymore." "I'll always do it," Nina replied, "because I remember what it was like to barely have enough. And I remember that kindness doesn't cost money. It costs attention. My wife would have loved you, Daniel said quietly. I wish I could have met her. In a way, you carry her forward. Every person you help, every life you touch, he smiled. That's her legacy. And now it's yours too. Nina looked at the cafe, at the people inside laughing and connecting, at the sign in the window advertising free meals and job opportunities. She'd learned something important that cold November day. Sometimes the people who look most broken are just waiting for someone to see them, and sometimes the smallest acts of kindness ripple outward in ways we never imagine. One breakfast had changed 2 lives, and in changing those lives, it had transformed an entire community. That's the thing about compassion. It never stays small. Give it away freely and watch it grow into something beautiful. If this story warmed your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring tales. Leave a comment sharing a moment when someone's kindness changed your day. Your story might be exactly what someone needs to hear.